Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalists Roundtable. We'll look at the week's top stories, including a Maricopa County supervisor calling for the county recorder to be investigated for public corruption. Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Journalists Roundtable. And joining us tonight, Jim Small of the Arizona Mirror, Cameron Sanchez of KJZZ Radio, and Lori Roberts of the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. Good to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Jim, let's start with you, and let's start with, holy smokes, what's going on with the Board of Supervisors? What's going on with Maricopa County government here?
Well, just to back things up, for most of the year, the Board of Supervisors has been negotiating and or fighting and or suing and being sued by the county recorder, Justin Heap, over essentially who controls every aspect of elections in the county. Back last fall, when it looked like Heap was going to win and the previous Board of Supervisors was not too enamored with that, they went ahead and they made some changes to the agreement. And technically under state law, Boards of Supervisors are in charge of elections in most counties. They delegate that authority to the county recorder. Maricopa County is no different. And there are some things that are sent to the recorder, other things that are handled by the board. About 5 or 6 years ago, the board pulled some of it back and took control of day of voting in particular. And this was kind of, they renewed that agreement and they made some changes to pull some things away from Justin Heap, anticipating that he would win. He did win, and he immediately set about trying to basically renegotiate that deal and said, we should have a new deal, and they've been fighting about that ever since.
Let's talk about the renegotiation, Cameron, because this is where apparently the county recorder has tried to get a couple of supervisors to go around the chair, and all sorts of emails. Jen Fifield to vote, be good for her. She got all this stuff out here. But what are we getting out here? What's going on?
I think negotiation is a very gentle term for the exchanges we've seen, especially in these newly uncovered communications that Jen got. Basically, Heap is very upset with the supervisors and has accused them of all sorts of things, and there's all this political theory about why they're trying to keep him out, and seems to think that it's his right and his job to be in charge of more than he currently is. And believes that it's targeted him. And yes, right before he became the county recorder, the former county recorder, who was not a fan of him and had run against him, and the former Board of Supervisors did change some things. But in these communications, he's kind of railing against some of the supervisors and saying, you have to, go against the chair and give me my power.
Yeah, and said so apparently through these emails, telling a couple of Republican members of the board that, hey, we can go around the chair.
We can go around the chair, and then he went out to a group of Republican legislative district, what do you call them, precinct committeemen, and intimated that he had the votes to oust the chairman, Tom Galvin. So I don't think that he has those votes there, and I don't think, based on just my read of things, I don't think that he has the votes as he claimed of the lone Democrat on the board, Steve Gallardo, to renegotiate the deal and to basically give him what he wants, which is more power. I find it difficult to believe that the lone Democrat on the board would be working secretly with the MAGA representative, who is our Maricopa County recorder now, to give more power to that end of the aisle. So Steve Gallardo is very upset, and when these emails came out in which he just basically said, I've got him on board with some, I did a lot of things, and he's with us. If we can just, if the two of you, the more conservative members of the board, will go along with this, we can get this deal done. And Gallardo was furious. He's called for an investigation, saying I didn't do this, and basically, in words that I don't know that we'll ever hear again, I want Justin Heap, to keep my name out of his lying mouth.
Yeah, that's it. We got kind of tense there, Jim. But again, Heap said he used back channeling and he used arm twisting in order to get Gallardo to go with Lesko and Stewart, Republicans, to give Justin Heap more. Who's really? Did he? What was that all?
Well, I mean, he was very clearly, he was trying to persuade Debbie Lesko and Mark Stewart, right, who he viewed as, I think, natural allies. And I think that if you looked at that board and you were going to pick people who were going to be allies with Justin Heap, I think that that's who you would probably settle on as the people who would likely be in his corner. And he clearly felt that they weren't in his corner, or that they weren't, forcefully advocating enough for him and for his positions and for what he wanted. And so you could see kind of through these text messages that he was really trying to cajole them and trying to persuade them and honestly trying to BS them a little bit, it seemed, into coming to his side and saying, like, hey, look, we've got the Democrat on board, and almost as though okay, if I can get these two on board, then we'll figure out that third vote later because we need 3 out of the 5. I think that it's really hard to fathom. I think, like Lori said, right, that Steve Gallardo would work behind the scenes with Justin Heap to try to accomplish anything like this. It strains credulity, I guess, to put it politely.
And the irony here is that this is a man who ran on a platform of restoring integrity and what else? Transparency and honesty to this office. Well, now his honesty is being called into question. He's not being very transparent in that he's not available. He's in his bunker currently and not talking to anybody. He won't release his own emails despite having gotten public records requests. I think he's hurting his credibility, although probably not with the MAGA folks who probably see it as a conspiracy.
Well, hurting his credibility and his chances of ever getting what he's asking for, because I think the situation just gets worse and worse. And if there was ever a shot of him working with Gallardo, which would be an interesting relationship, I think that's gone out the window. I imagine that he said, keep my name out of your lying mouth, in the style of Will Smith, and has since called for an investigation into Heap by the Attorney General.
Yeah, because he says it makes it look like I'm up to no good, that I'm doing some funny business.
Yeah, and I think you could certainly read Heap's messages to the other Republican supervisors as kind of intimating, right, that he had bought off Gallardo in some fashion,
right,
through some way. He kind of hinted at things like that, and I think that was really what seemed to outrage Gallardo the most. Was essentially almost, in his words, kind of the way he presented it, was almost being accused of like taking a bribe to do this vote, which he forcefully denied, and again turned right around and called for an investigation into Justin Heap.
Does Justin Heap have a point, though, in the sense that recorders had X, Y, and Z responsibilities? The minute he comes down the highway, we're taking away X and we're shaving off a little bit of Y.
Honestly, I would say yes. But I think his legal argument that it's his right to have that job and the same role that Stephen Richer did, I think that's where there's a miscommunication, because really in state law, a lot of the power is just with the county supervisors, and it's their jurisdiction and their delegation. And they have an elections director too. They've got a lot of stuff to operate. So, them pulling back definitely seems targeted at him, but does he have the right to it? No, I don't think so.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we're talking about Republicans fighting Republicans here once again, and both sides are now in court, so we are paying for Republicans to sue Republicans so that they can, I guess, get a judge to decide who gets to do what in elections. But to me, it seems pretty clear that the power is a divided thing, but the ultimate power lies with the Board of Supervisors.
I mean, I think Cameron's right. This was targeted at Heap. I think that we were in October of last year, and they looked at the landscape and went, all right, this guy's probably going to win. We don't want to give him all of the same power because he's an election denier, because he advocated for a lot of things that the board had spent years fighting against. But in that same token that it was aimed at him back in, what was it, 2019 when they pulled power away from the Democrat. When Adrian Fontes was county recorder, that was why the county has an elections director now, is because they literally ripped away, half of the election control from that office because the Republican-controlled board didn't like Fontes, they didn't like the way he was managing the office, and they wanted to take some of that power back and really have more of a hand, at least in day of elections.
So we got a lawsuit, we got a countersuit, we got a bunch of people with emails flying around saying all sorts of things.
Maybe an investigation.
Maybe the Attorney General's going to take a look. That's what Gallardo wants. Where is all of this headed, and what does this mean for government at the county level?
Well, it means the government has come to a screeching halt. They can't do anything. They can't agree to anything. And this is as we have an election approaching next year, a very important election, one would say, where it would behoove the two sides to work together. But Heap is acting, I don't want to say juvenile, but I'll say it. He's kind of acting like a toddler having a tantrum. This is not the way that you get along and negotiate with people. But if your job is one that you view as performative, to say, there's obviously something wrong with the county, your fellow Republicans, this is mostly a new board, And the implication is we don't trust you. We, the MAGA people, don't trust you, the board, to run elections effectively. You know, where is this going to end? How many more cycles is this going to go on?
What do you think, Cameron? I mean, how long does this go on?
It does make me nervous for the next election because there's such a lack of trust, and any time that any one tiny thing goes wrong, it makes me think it might get blown out of proportion by either side, depending on what happens. I think there's maybe a possibility of something happening through the state legislature. I know that that was sort of a part of budget talks from the Freedom Caucus, which are really like Heap's allies, to try to give him more power and squeeze that into the budget process, which didn't happen because we've got, you know, a divided government. But hypothetically, in some sort of future where, you know, Katie Hobbs is gone and the Freedom Caucus has more control, maybe they want to change the laws that we were talking about earlier that sets everything in the hands of the county supervisors.
Yeah, state once again moving in on municipalities as they seem to love to do. All right, Jim, the No Labels Party is recruiting for 2026. Last I heard, the No Labels Party didn't want anyone on the No Labels Party.
I know, that was interesting, right? In 2024, the new No Labels Party got organized in Arizona, and with the express intent of only running the presidential candidate. And they went to court. There was a big court battle over whether anyone who registered as a No Labels voter could actually run under the No Labels banner for any of the other offices. Party said no. Court ultimately said yes, they can. You can't stop that from happening. So in the weeks since that court ruling, the No Labels Party here is really kind of seeking to reinvent itself in a way and really position itself as something that is outside of the two mainstream parties. And I think it's a really interesting move. Basically, in Arizona law, if you're an independent, if you're not connected with one of the parties, in order to get on the ballot, you have incredibly high hurdles. The Republicans and Democrats wrote the laws to make sure the Republicans and Democrats can get on the ballot, and anyone else has a really hard time of doing it. And so independents have to gather something like, I don't know, it's like 5 or 10 times as many signatures to get on the ballot. There's a whole process for them to go through, and it's very difficult, which is why you never see independent candidates on our ballot, very rarely. The No Labels Party basically said, hey, we're going to be the home for you. If you're an independent and you don't want to run as a Republican or a Democrat, come to us and run. And essentially, I don't think they're going to have a party platform. They're not going to do anything except for kind of serve as a vehicle to let people get on the ballot with much lower signature thresholds and really open up the doors, I would imagine, or what they're trying to do is open up the doors pretty wide for third party and independent candidates.
Yeah, which is a very different technique. And we got Paul Johnson, former Phoenix Mayor Paul Johnson. He's now the Arizona chair of the No Labels Party.
Right. He's fresh off of working on the open primary proposition, which of course failed. The whole idea is to get a more centrist government, or to give a more centrist government at least a chance to get before voters so that they can decide if this is something that they want. And not all independents, of course, are centrists. There's all different kinds of reasons why people become independents, but I think that is their goal, is to give moderate voices an equal shot to those who are at the extreme limits of their parties.
Yeah, I've 40,000 registered voters with the No Labels Party already.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
It's not a lot, but it's something. Yeah.
No, but Lori, I think, brings up the important point here, which is that this is absolutely what they were trying to do with I think it was the Make Elections Fair initiative in our last election cycle, and Chuck Coughlin and all those folks who were saying, you know, a lot of the problems that we have in politics stem from our deeply divided two-party system. And the fact that, like Jim mentioned, it's near impossible for third-party candidates to get into these elected offices. And that's a problem, in their view, largely because partisan primaries attract kind of the most intense political folks of the most extreme ends of the parties. And so you end up with general election candidates who the center maybe doesn't want, because you've got two options who are way over here and way over here. And they want to present an option for folks in the general election who's actually maybe something in the middle.
So is basically the No Labels Party is looking for a label for itself. It's let's come on over here, and will enough people come on over there? Could they make a difference?
I think it's certainly possible that they could, right? I think just lowering the bar and opening the gate really wide for third party, for independent, for more, you know, centrist, more moderate candidates to get not just on the ballot, but to get to the general election. You know, I mean, we see that a lot, right, where you might have moderate Democrats or moderate Republicans who get squeezed out in a primary because of exactly what Cameron said, where you have the most politically active and most kind of like politically ideological voters in a primary. So a lot of times these kind of centrist candidates don't make it through the primary. This would allow them to get through the primary and get onto the general election ballot. And so then if you're in a situation where you're in maybe a battleground legislative district, say, and you've got a moderate voice in the middle, and you have people on the far right and far left. I think two things are going to happen. I think you might be able to pull the right and left in toward the center a little bit, but you also really open up a door for someone could play a spoiler. It may not even
Right.
be that a no labels candidate wins, but they may be able to pull from enough of one side or the other that you could see an upset happen.
And I could see that upset in 2026, of course, being to the benefit of Republicans, because I think there are a lot of disaffected moderates from the Republican Party, certainly, but there's probably a whole lot more on the other side, and Democrats are trying to get those moderates to come their way. For example, in a governor's race, Katie Hobbs certainly will try to appeal to centrist Republicans to come her way. If there's a third option in the middle, those centrists are more likely to go to that person. So it could really hurt Democrats.
But if you're a wild-eyed bomb thrower and you're from the way left or the way right and you decide, I'm going to be a no labels party candidate, Ninth Circuit says, have at it.
Yeah, that's
That doesn't sound very moderate to me, Cameron.
the whole no labels thing. I think it's a big dream and a big scheme, and I'm excited that they're excited, but I don't know if I believe in it because of the way that we have the system set up, and I don't know if I can realistically see like a no labels candidate becoming, our next governor or something. And it's partly because of what is the platform? If this is everyone else, then what does that mean? Like, are you going to raise my taxes or are you going to lower my taxes? Do you support climate change restrictions? Do you not support them? What am I voting for? Who are you?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, by the same token, you could just say, I'm so sick of Republicans and I'm so sick of Democrats. You seem like you're reasonable, or I can maybe get on board with you. You're my person.
Certainly possible, but I think that they're going to face the same challenges, maybe even a little bit of different challenges and bigger hurdles. I think in getting the funding and the financing to mount these campaigns, that'll be difficult. Clean elections will certainly be an option in some cases. But they are going to have to be able to raise money to communicate that, to get that message and whatever their individual platform is out to voters.
Yeah. Lori, we had Secretary of State Adrian Fontes on last night, actually, talking about this. But we want to talk more about the cybersecurity breach, which was a breach of the site. And all of a sudden, we find out that the Ayatollah is running for every office in Arizona.
Yeah, I think that some hackers that are believed to be from Iran hacked the Secretary of State's election website in late June after the U.S. bombed those Iranian nuclear sites and put a message on there and pictures in red and black of the Ayatollah Khomeini, who was, of course, the Ayatollah who presided during the Iran hostage crisis back in the 70s. And as I understand it, they got only into the candidate portal and perhaps one other portal, maybe the site that voters would see on election night, the results site. But of course, there's no results right now. Adrian Fontes put out a press release about it a week later, began meeting with legislators to talk about what they can do. And then all of a sudden, Turning Point USA heard about it. Tyler Boyer put out something that he'd heard from an inside source that there was this leak. That's 2 weeks after the press release came out. So naturally what happened is a big politicization of this thing that, this is a horrible thing that's happened and it's all Adrian Fontes' fault. When in fact, probably what needs to happen and what has needed to happen for quite some time is money put forth to shore up the system, so a cyber defense system against this sort of thing. The legislature has been unwilling for 3 years to do that. And now, of course, you're hearing the far right people, complaining about Adrian Fontes. Well, what's he supposed to do? Have the cyber fairy go in and seal off the portals?
Yeah, and Fontes on our show and has numerous times said, $10 million is needed because these things were breached. The things that were breached, they're old. They don't even make replacement parts for these things anymore. Something needs to be done. But to Lori's point regarding lawmakers, who was it? Was it? I don't want to chance the name here. Didn't someone just say it was a cover-up? Said that Fontes was basically going after.
I think Hoffman.
Was it? I think it was Hoffman. Yeah.
Which I could have guessed without remembering, but I think it was Hoffman.
It was a massive cover-up.
Yeah, a massive cover-up.
Capital letters.
I'm sorry, massive cover-up. Yes.
It's a really interesting case for a lot of reasons. It's not just your average hacker, and initially the Secretary of State's office said we think this was a foreign attack. It was Iran, and I was like, why do you think that? And he was like, well, the hacker left a message that said this is Iran, and we're attacking you because we hate you. And I was like, that's a good reason to assume that then. And what else is interesting is the politics of this and the fact that it wasn't just the Secretary of State's office that was attacked. It was other Arizona agencies too. That attack on the Secretary of State's office lasted for about a week, they said, and potentially some other states are being affected and other secretaries of state across the country. So we don't really know how wide-ranging this is. And then, it begs the question of how do we prevent this in the future? Some of those systems, is my understanding, they go back 10, sometimes even 20 plus years.
Yes.
We've got really old software and it's just not keeping up. So they would like an infusion of funds sooner rather than later, which means outside of the budget process.
Right. Is that going to happen, Jim?
I don't know.
Even later. Forget sooner. How about later?
I don't know. Maybe I think still pretty early to tell. I think Republicans are going to be kind of loath to give Adrian Fontes money to shore up something that they can spend the next 18 months beating him over the head about. Just politically speaking, I don't know if they will. I could certainly see a situation where the governor's office may be able to redirect some money. We've got federal cash. There are pots of money that they might be able to send over there to help do this. This all does come to, I think it's absolutely imperative to note that, months after Doge and Elon Musk basically trimmed the cybersecurity funding for elections, that, all this federal money, these pools of money that states could apply for and counties could apply for in order to safeguard their electoral systems, that money's gone away, and so you're left in this situation now where your avenues for finding that money are even fewer than they would have been a year ago.
Well, Fontes has actually asked to be able to redirect some money within his own budget, but he apparently needs legislative approval to do that. So now we'll wait to see if they're going to be adults about it and allow him to do that, or as you say, Jim, if they'd rather just have something to bash him over the head with for the next 18 months as they get ready to try to oust him in the election.
Real quickly, Lori, I want to stick with you on Justine Wodsack. We talked about this a little bit last week, but her lawyer, Dennis Welenchick, has backed out of this. This is a traffic citation that has just become monumental for Ms. Wodsack. What do we make of all this?
Well, we don't. Dennis Welenchick filed a motion to withdraw from the case against Wodsack's approval for professional considerations. We don't know what that means. It could be, of course, a range of things, everything from him not getting paid to some other disagreement that they fundamentally have. We don't know that. We only know that she doesn't want to lose him as an attorney.
Yeah.
He is the one who filed the suit, but yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention, she's been trying to raise money for this crowdfunding, and I think there's a GoFundMe or some similar site set up where she's asking for people to donate to her legal fees. I think that she's not having much traction with that, especially since we're talking about a speeding ticket. And I also think that maybe Dennis Welenchick, I don't want to speculate about his motives, but I don't know this is like the best case to take, considering that, again, it's a speeding ticket, and I think she's asking for millions of dollars in damages.
$8 million in damages.
$8 million.
That's a heck of a
She
speeding
lost
ticket.
a $24,000 a year job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jim?
I think the fundraising, the crowdfunding thing that you put up there, I think was pretty clear that, like, hey, I need this money, I can't afford to pay my attorney. And that showed up online 3 days after he put in this motion to say, I'm not going to be your attorney anymore. I don't think it's hard to connect dots A and B there. If she were to get the money, I think Dennis Welenchick would be right there and continue to push this $8 million claim that the Tucson Police Department coordinated with everyone there and the media and
the
all of
entire
it in
city,
order
apparently,
to kneecap, this lady's election chances.
All right. Hey, before we go, Lori, we'll talk with you on this one because I think you had the most contact with Alfredo Gutierrez over the years, and he had a lot of contact. He was a very influential person. Talk to us about him.
Very influential
Died this
person.
week at the age of 79.
Yes, he did. He died of cancer this week, and it's a big loss for the state. There's a lot that we could learn from Alfredo Gutierrez. What I would start with is when I covered the legislature way back in the Stone Ages, and Alfredo was Senate Minority Leader. I'm sorry, Senate Minority. I'll get it.
He was in leadership.
He was in leadership, Senate Minority Leader at the time when House Majority Leader Burton Barr was there. Barr was a Republican, Alfredo was a Democrat. They were arguably the two most influential and important figures in the state, other than the governor at that time, Bruce Babbitt, a Democrat in the state. They did not see each other as enemies. They saw each other as the loyal opposition. They could work together. They could have a beer together. And as a result, they also passed a lot of influential legislation that has influenced this state. The Groundwater Management Act comes to mind. The Urban Lands Act comes to mind. The access, the way that we, as our it was an experimental system in those days, comes to mind. They did things together for the state. Today's legislature could learn so much from those people, but of course they won't.
Is there room in today's legislature for an Alfredo Gutierrez?
There's a crying need for an Alfredo Gutierrez, but without a counterpart on the Senate, on the Republican side, someone willing to work with them. These days, if you are a Republican and you work with a Democrat, you can lose your committee chairmanship. You will be punished for that. You will be primaried if you dare to work with the Democrats on anything. It's the times in which we live. As I said, we could learn a lot from a guy like Alfredo. He worked all of his life on issues that he thought was important, and he got probably more done, other than Burton Barr, than anyone that I have seen in 30, 40 years of politics.
And he's still rabble-rousing here to the very end.
He really was. Earlier this year, he went to I think it was a
May Day.
anti-Trump, so he ripped down a Trump flag, and he also this year got his degree from ASU right here.
Yes, that's
because
right, after all
way
those
back
years.
in the day when he was in school, he got kicked out for organizing a college protest, kind of like you'd see today.
Yeah.
But he went back all these years later, great man.
All right, Alfredo Gutierrez, again dead at the age of 79 this week, and quite a history here in Arizona. Panel, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. That's it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.